Welcome to the Spot On Insurance Podcast, brought to you by Insurance Licensing Services of America, ILSA. This is Ted Tavares.
And this is Arlene Tavares coming to you from beautiful Puerto Rico. Today, we'll be taking a closer look at a topic that affects every single one of us.
But before we get started, don't forget to click on the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And now here's our host, Doug Foresta.
Hello and welcome to Spot On Insurance. This is your host, Doug Foresta. Today with me is Michael Jans from agencyrevolution.com. And we're going to be talking about more modern forms of marketing for the insurance industry. I'm really excited to have him on. Before I bring Michael on, I want to remind you that if you have not subscribed to the podcast, please do subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. You can put Spot On Insurance in search and you will find it. That way you make sure you don't miss any episodes. As I said, Michael Jans is from agencyrevolution.com, and our topic today is how the internet has changed the behavior of the modern insurance consumer and what we need to do to address that and to adapt to that. Michael Jans, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Pleasure to be here, Doug. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is I know you said that today's insurance consumer has changed. And can you say a little bit about what that change looks like?
Well, yes, happy to. And I think it's important that on one hand, we recognize that consumers haven't changed. People still want the same things that they have always wanted. They want, at least in the context of this discussion, they want safety, they want security for themselves, for their family, for their business. So in other words, the things that drive human behavior, they seem to be the same year after year, decade after decade, century after century. However, their behavior has changed. And because their behavior has changed, that means that those of us who are marketers need to match that behavior, and we need to find them so that we can reach them and touch their values and touch those things in them that really don't change, that desire for, again, safety, security, or what have you. So, as is often the case, technology really drives a lot of behavior. And when technology takes off, like the internet has, then it's really had a very profound effect on the way people behave. For example, many years ago, Doug, my most downloaded or requested report probably was requested actually long before our company taught the first internet marketing course, I think, for insurance agents back in about the year 2000. I had a report called 25 Steps to a Killer Yellow Pages Ad. Well, that was appropriate. Right. Now you can imagine it's the loneliest report on my bookshelf. But back then you can imagine that if you could communicate the right message, that was really important, as it is now, but you had to put it in a place where people were finding you or looking for you. So if you go back to the 90s or the early 2000s, and if somebody wanted insurance, where were they going to look? Well, probably going to open up the Yellow Pages. Now, of course, that's not happening. So the big change is the change in technology and how that's affected people's behavior. So let me just throw a few numbers at you.
Sure.
So for those who actually might have some doubt that the internet's changed behavior, let's take a look at a few numbers. According to GE Capital, 81% of consumers research online before they shop. 88% trust online reviews as much as they trust the personal recommendations from their friends or their family. 65% read between 4 and over 52 reviews. So obviously those are important. 98.4% of the population, which means virtually everybody checks their email at least once a day. And 39% are willing to confess that they check their email 10 or more times a day. And let me just throw one more figure at you. A company called Network World analyzed how many people touch their phone with discrete touches like a touch, a tap,
right,
a click, or a swipe during the course of a day. and they arrived at an average number of 2,617. So my wife and I have been married for 40 years. We love each other a lot. If I touched her 2,617 times in a day, she'd probably ask me to back off. So we have a very intimate relationship with the technologies of today. So, boom, there's the answer to your question.
So let me
Today's consumers change because that's where they are. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So let me ask you this, so we know that people are really, they are, insurance customers, consumers, they are online, they are looking at, they are looking for reviews. And I know that we're talking today about, new marketing or content marketing. Can you explain a little bit about what content marketing is and how it differs from perhaps the traditional forms of marketing?
Yeah, in fact, I'll give you a definition of what content marketing is from the Content Marketing Institute. Great. They describe content marketing as a strategic marketing approach focused on creating and distributing, and the adjectives here are important, valuable, relevant, and consistent content. So when you think of content, I mean, it's maybe a bit of an overused word. It's stuff, right? It's information. It's the stuff that now comes largely through some form of digital channel, but certainly doesn't have to. If I wrote a book and published it, that's content. And it's designed to attract and retain, not just attract, but retain a clearly defined audience, and ultimately to drive profitable customer action. That's their definition of what content marketing is. Now, here's the interesting thing. Those of us who have been longtime students of marketing, particularly the field of direct response marketing, will recognize that this notion of content marketing is nothing new at all. A lot of companies have been doing it for over 100 years. If you looked at some of the early ads in magazines, like 100 years ago or so, magazines were one of the new technologies because the ability to publish and distribute became much easier then. And so if you look at some of the ads in the magazines back then, you'll see if somebody, for example, was advertising a course on learn how to play music or a course on, lose weight or gain weight or whatever, oftentimes it was pure content marketing. There was an ad that offered information about the problem, and then it offered an opportunity to send in a self-addressed stamped envelope for a free book or a free guidebook or a free guide on how to, play music in 90 days or less, right? So then you would send in your self-addressed stamped envelope, and you would get content back, and the content would then inform you and maybe persuade you to do business with that company. So this notion of content marketing it's not new. When I started my first insurance marketing company, Insurance Profit Systems, that's what I did. I took out a full-page ad in the trade magazines like Rough Notes or Independent Agent, and at the end of about 1,000-word ad where I just delivered a lot of information about what it is and the benefits of what I had to offer, at the end of it, I'd say, for a free report on how to yada, 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 call this 800 number. Now, fortunately then, I didn't require people to send in a self-addressed stamped envelope, but they still had to call an 800 number, and then I would send them the free report, and then I used a relatively new technology, a fax machine, so if they wanted to buy my course, they could fax me the order form that came with the free report with their credit card number. Well, that was 25-ish years ago. The principles are just the same. It's just the technologies have changed. And so the ability to deliver content and valuable content it's within the grasp of everybody. So while on one hand, I see a lot of agents and brokers they're confused or confounded or maybe a little bit nervous about how the consumer has changed and they're doing all this digital stuff. The good news is that you're a publisher now. All those tools that are available to reach them instantly and effectively with good content, written content, video content, audio content, they're at your fingertips. Admittedly, just like I had to master the use of display ads in trade magazines. I had to master some of the elements of writing copy. Admittedly, people do need to master certain principles of using this technology, but the good news is it's right there. It's relatively easy to use, and you can deliver valuable, relevant, and consistent information to the audience that you want.
Let's talk about those fundamental principles. So if for insurance agents, brokers, producers who are listening, what are some of those good fundamentals that I need to think about when it comes to content marketing for insurance in the digital age?
Yeah. Okay. Very good. That's a really good question. I think that it's important to understand what you're trying to accomplish. So, and to recognize that not everybody's in the same place at the same time. So, oftentimes, when people think of advertising and marketing, and when people think of growth, when agents think of growth, they're often saying, I need leads. There's a fundamental strategic principle that I think is of critical importance to the insurance agency, especially the independent insurance agent channel. And that is that in our channel, the money's in the relationship. In the acquisition channel, the direct channel like Geico or Progressive Direct, those direct providers, they know that they don't keep their clients nearly as long as we do. And they have a business model that makes them very profitable, and they're growing very quickly by focusing on acquisition. If we play that game against them, we're going to lose. They have a business model that works for acquisition, that works really well with what we would consider to be a relatively high churn rate. Those things don't work for us. Significant and substantial research has been done on where the money is in the independent agency channel, and the money comes from creating deep relationships with customers and loyalty with customers, because what happens is, number one, they stay longer. Well, the ability to keep clients longer becomes very, very profitable because the expenses tend to be on the front end of the marketing cycle. Number two, if the relationships are deep and the loyalty and the trust is high, then they will also buy more insurance. In fact, according to Bain & Company's research, they'll buy about 25% more insurance. Well, that's huge. That's where you really start getting the margins. And then the third element is that they'll generate more referrals for you. So a non-loyal customer, a detractor on the Net Promoter Score, basically doesn't give you any referrals at all. They give you complaints. A neutral customer generally gives you about one referral, but a highly loyal insurance customer gives you 2.5. So what Bain's research demonstrated to the industry is that the money's in the relationship, and if you can cultivate loyalty, your loyal customers will generate a huge amount of margin and growth to your business. The customer lifetime value for that customer is 7 times what it is for a low loyalty client, and 3 times what it is for a neutral client. So, to tie this into content marketing, while obviously it's always important to have some form of lead generation, and content marketing kills at that, it's also of critical importance for the independent agency channel to guide people through their customer experience from being a lead to a prospect, to a buyer, to a client, ultimately to a promoter, a raving fan, a highly loyal insurance client, because that is the ideal client that generates the most growth and the highest margins to the channel. So I think it's really important to remember that marketing doesn't stop when you get a customer. That's really just the beginning. You want to continue to deliver ongoing, consistent value to the customer, to your customer, not just to your prospect.
Spot on Insurance is sponsored by ILSA, Insurance Licensing Services of America, America's premier licensing and regulatory compliance experts. To learn more about ILSA and the services they provide, visit ilsainc.com. So let's talk about, we're using this term content, right? And
Yeah.
let's talk more specifically about what we mean by this, right? So
Got it.
what I hear you saying is it's not enough for me to just use content for lead acquisition. I need to continue to follow up. What kind of content are we talking about? I mean, video, blogs. I've heard about this thing called podcasting.
This thing called podcasting, right?
Right.
That's a really great question. When I think it's important to sort of look at content in a model, a way to organize the information on this, so that we don't just jump to which media should I use. I mean,
Sure.
I've heard this for years. Being
the
an
best
insurance
one, right?
marketing consultant to the industry, I could go back 25 years when people were saying, "Hey, Michael, what's better, a letter or a postcard?" Well, I'd say, slow down here, bucko. That's like the third question. So I like to ask these, questions in order. I call this the 3M model: market, message, media. And the first thing you have to answer is, who's the market that I'm trying to reach? Because if I have a niche of wildland firefighters, I'm going to deliver information that's different to them than my niche of private water companies. It's just they're different. They're different markets. So I do need to do some segmentation of my book, ideally, different than my homeowners, for example. So number one, we identify the market. Then we identify the message. So, what are my private water companies, what do they want to know about? What do they care about? And so we start to articulate what that message is. Then we can begin to look at the media. So media comes in all shapes and sizes. Ebooks, blog, video, white paper, cheat sheets, podcasts, audio, infographics, speaking in front of an audience. A keynote is content. So, webinars, all that stuff that is designed to give value to the customer, the consumer, takes lots of forms and lots of shapes, and they all have kind of a different role in the model. But yeah, those are some of the common forms of content or media that we're used to. All that stuff, the ebooks and the blog and so on and so forth. So maybe I don't know what your next question is, but it might be, what should people do? Like, what content works these days?
The question, exactly. You read my mind. So the next question, because I hear this a lot from this question from brokers and producers and agents, which is, okay, I need to get this content out there. What should I talk about?
Oh, well, so the answer to that question is, let's go back to the first M, the market. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's pick one for fun. Let's say arborists. Okay, tree people.
Yes.
And I'm mentioning that one because I've got a great client who markets to tree people, the people who own arborist companies. So first thing is the market. So then the next thing is, what do we want to say? So now we have to say, who am I trying to reach? Am I trying to reach new people and generate leads, or am I trying to deliver value to my existing customers? So let's say I want leads. Well, marketers these days tend to talk about the marketing funnel. You've probably heard about that. So you want somebody to jump in the funnel. Well, they don't jump into the middle of the funnel, and they don't jump into the bottom of the funnel. They jump into the top of the funnel. So if we're trying to get people to jump into the top of the funnel, those are the leads. Okay, we want some kind of thing that marketers often call a lead gen magnet, which answers a common, almost perhaps universal problem of genuine concern to your marketplace. So what might arborists be concerned about? Well, they may be concerned about worker safety. That's an issue. So if you had a lead gen piece, maybe it's a cheat sheet, 11 ways arborists can protect themselves and their workers from injury. Boom. That's probably something that's going to appeal to that audience. And so now you can identify 11 different ways this kind of research is not hard to do. And by the way, I've got shortcuts for this, so I'm more than happy to share the shortcuts. But you can get on a tool like buzzsumo.com, type in arborists, and you can see, hey, what kind of content is being most consumed in that field today, and it'll show you. So, in terms of, I think that there is a critical principle here, Doug, that when you create content, it's really, really about them. It's not about you. So nobody wants to download a piece that says, "I've been in business for 137 years, and you can trust us."
That's not really content, right? Yeah, that's a very good point. That I was thinking about that. A lot of times, people are like, "Oh, okay, so an agent will say, it's the new marketing. I have to be online. Let me tell them how great we are
right.
in a video." But there's no value to the consumer, right? Like, what is in it for me to know that you've been in business for 178 years?
Yeah, right. I mean, that might be interesting to me as I start working my way down to the bottom of the funnel, and maybe you've got, a buyer's guide for insurance for arborists, something like that. And then, certainly you want to position yourself appropriately so you're trustworthy, and it's a small credibility booster to say you've been around for 137 years. But it's a small point, and nobody cares that much about it.
It's not a 7-minute insurance video.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I remember years ago there was some things float around. Years ago, I got into a little bit of a tiff in the industry with another marketer who was kind of pushing this product, and it was like a CD, and I happened to get a copy of it. One of my clients sent it to me, sent me a version of it, and he said, "What do you think of this?" And I said, "Well, it's like really awful." Because it's like you put in this CD and the consumer prospect. I mean, they're cool. It's a CD, new. It was back when it was new technology, and that's always attractive, like the shiny new thing. And then I listened to the interview, and the guys was just talking about how great he is.
Right. So that's another great gold nugget, I think, of what you're sharing here is, don't mistake just being on the internet as an agent for content marketing. Content marketing has to be valuable to the stage where that person is, who they are.
Right.
And, I wanted to ask you a follow-up question, which is, so you talked about a great idea for getting people into my funnel. What about for my existing insurance clients? What kind of information could I share that would help build that relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question. We address that in Agency Revolution to some extent, but I think agents also, really need to look at their market to, kind of come to some conclusions about this. But yeah, let me give you a few principles on that. Mm-hmm. Once somebody becomes a customer, then a lot of people, unfortunately, the industry is really getting some very bad marks these days about its how poorly it's communicating with the marketplace in general. Some research has been done on that by Ernst Young, and they discovered that I think it was 44% of consumers reported that they perceived no communication from their insurance provider in the last year and a half. And 86% of insurance consumers are not very satisfied with the communications from their insurance provider. And so there's a huge opportunity here for agents to stand out and to cultivate that kind of loyalty. And so I think there are a couple of principles here. Number one, first of all, recognize that most of the digital channels that we use are non-invasive and non-threatening. And so, while there was another report done that I thought was really fascinating by a company called M-Blocks, and they determined that it was somewhere around 85%, 84% of consumers do not want phone calls from their insurance provider. Why? Because it's kind of an invasive technology. Whatever I'm doing, you're invading my space. And so the beauty of the digital channels is that they really are non-invasive and non-threatening. But if you offer something of value, and somebody, let's say it comes in an email and they see a subject line, or it's a social posting and they see it on LinkedIn or they see it on Facebook, and it really attracts their attention, then they get to download it at their own time. They also get to read it on their own time. So, the beauty is to realize what a safe way that this is to deliver information. So the two principles here, I think, that are really important is, one, there needs to be some consistency. I know, there was an insurance marketing, quote unquote, guru a few years ago who was preaching, you've got to touch your client 17 times a year, because he was selling a tool that would do that. And unfortunately, I saw some of the content that he was delivering, and it was just really awful. It was without value. So the last thing I think you want to do is irritate your customers 17 times a year. So the number is, there's no magic number, but it should be done with some consistency. And then the second part is of critical importance. Every single communication should add some value to that person's life.
Right.
So let's say they are let's take a personal line. You take your personal lines book of business. What could you say to your personal lines book that would consistently add value to them throughout the year? Well, maybe, depending on where you are, when winter approaches, you might want to remind them about driver safety, and maybe give them a link to some tips for driver safety. And then, I'm going to jump through the seasons, but, when summer approaches, a lot of people are going on vacation. You might want to talk to them about how to protect your home while you're away. You may also want to give them some tips on how to protect yourself while you're traveling, because bad things can happen while you're traveling. And then, the fall rolls around, and you might want to share some insight on how to drive carefully during Halloween, and also how to make sure that children are safe during Halloween. And then, of course, people are concerned. Why do they come to you? They come to you for protection. And so, a really appropriate role for an insurance agent or broker to take is to be that person who's like a shepherd, or the leader of the tribe who's protecting the people. And so, you can always give tips to people on how to protect your home from fire, how to protect your home from burglary, and if it's business, you can do the same kinds of things. So anything in the area.
It adds value. And it matches to who I am and where I am in the customer journey.
Right. Now, and it's, I think we need to contrast that with the current perception that the consumer has of today's insurance agent, which is, unfortunately, I gave the guy a big check, right? And maybe it's not. Maybe you're not getting that much money, but they cut a check for $2,000. They don't realize you're not getting very much of that, but they cut a check for $2,000, and then they don't hear from you for a year. But then you reach out, 11 months later, maybe 10 and a half months later, you reach out and you say, hey, let's talk about your renewal. Okay. It's like, wow, really? It's like the only time we talk is
where were you?
The only time we talk is when you want money.
Right.
So the beauty of content marketing is that it matches the independent insurance agency channel so well, because we can create meaningful relationships, we can add value, we can treat people with the ultimate respect by always giving, and we can be present in their lives in a non-invasive way. I think that there's a complete paradigm shift that some agents may need to take, because a lot of people think, when they think of marketing, their question is, how much can I get, right? Because there's magic in marketing. Right. How much can I get? And what I would encourage them to do is really flip that around advanced marketers know that their powerful question is, how much can I give?
How much can I give? Absolutely. Beautifully said. My guest today is Michael Jans, who you've been sharing and giving lots of great content, by the way, today to us.
Oh, good.
I want to make sure to give you an opportunity. I did mention that you're from Agency Revolution. Do you want to explain to our listeners just briefly what Agency Revolution is, how you help?
Happy to, yes. Yeah. I started, or I co-founded Agency Revolution 7 or 8 years ago as a way to address this problem. So it's a marketing automation system that integrates with most of the agency or broker management systems and uses that information in the agency management system to automatically trigger the communications that you want it to trigger to your customer base. So it does guide somebody from being a new lead to a new customer. If they have a claim, it automatically reads that information and triggers communications using email, using postcards, and using text messaging to the customer base. So, and in full disclosure, I sold my equity in Agency Revolution earlier this summer. I think that the company that acquired us with private equity is making the company even better. And I continue to obviously to be a raving fan of what Agency Revolution does. So if people want to find out more about it, they should look up agencyrevolution.com. I also will mention that speaking of content, I'm putting putting the finishing touches on my latest book. I haven't really picked the title yet, but basically it's a guide to content marketing for insurance agents and brokers. It's not done yet, but if people want to get in the waiting list, they certainly can.
Great. Thank you. Michael Jans, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hey, want up-to-date insurance information? Visit SpotOnInsurance.com, where you'll discover an ever-growing library of podcasts, videos, articles, and online tools by professionals for professionals to enhance your insurance education.